Okay, so I hope you found the first section useful. We're going to go straight through now till about 9:30. Remember, guys, interact. If you've got any questions along the way, even if it's not relevant to the subject that we're talking about, please feel free to ask. Okay, so based on feedback from the last seminar, we want people said to us, how do we deal with antisocial behaviour? Antisocial behaviour in a tenancy is one of the hardest things to deal with in terms of what the council expect of us as agents, what the council expect of you as landlords. Because if you have a tenant in a fixed term contract, it's actually relatively difficult to get possession of your property. Because you can use a Section 21 notice to end the tenancy at the end of a fixed term. But if they've moved in and they're on a 6-month contract or even a 12-month contract, and they move in and from day one they're a nightmare, and the girls here will support me in Liverpool, which is my favourite area of managing properties, we had some lovely tenants that moved into a property that were provided to us and said that they need support and they've got all of these support workers, and it turned out that they were the family from hell. They put caravans on the driveway and the roads and had hooked up the electric to the caravans. They were taking their car and driving it at the neighbours. They were absolutely horrific tenants, absolute tenants from hell. But these tenants were in receipt of housing benefit. So what that meant was the rent was being paid because the rent was coming straight to us. So we couldn't use Section 8, Ground 8, which is a mandatory ground of possession for 2 months' rent arrears. So the only option that we had to evict these tenants was using discretionary grounds. So there's 17 grounds for possession under a Section 8. Grounds 1 to 8 are mandatory, so if you can prove any of grounds 1 to 8 are applicable, which are really things like the landlord was resident, needs the property back, the mortgagee requires possession of the property because landlords failed to pay the mortgage, it's a student let, it's a holiday let, it's a minister of religion let, the tenant's dead. Those are the only mandatory grounds, and rent arrears. Everything else above there is discretionary. So in the case of an antisocial behaviour situation, the only way you can get the tenant out is one, use a Section 21, but you can't use that in the first 4 months of a tenancy. So in the first 4 months of the fixed term, you can't use it, so that's probably not going to be an option. So the only other thing we can rely on is Section 8, and there are 2 grounds that we could use, Ground 12, which is breach of tenancy, and Ground 14, which is that the tenant is a nuisance. It's a little bit more elaborative than that, but in a nutshell, it means that they are a nuisance and causing upset at the property. So this is the process that you need to follow if you are in receipt of a tenant with antisocial behaviour. And it's very important that you do follow this process because councils are very, very strict on the effects that antisocial behaviour has to the rest of the community and the neighbours and so forth. So you must write them a written letter advising them of the breach that they are in. So you would look throughout your tenancy, you would take out the clause that they are breaching, and you would write a letter to them advising them that they are currently in breach of the tenancy agreement, clause 1.4. You note the clause within there, and you ask them to remedy that breach within a given time scale. Now, in the case of antisocial behaviour, the breach is likely to be immediate. In the breach of a caravan on the driveway, it may be that you'll give them 7 days to remove the said problem. Now, if they are really antisocial, like the lovely tenants in Liverpool, they won't listen. So you have to write them another letter. And this time you need to state to them that it needs to be a little bit stronger. You need to reiterate the breach and the fact that they've not remedied it in the given timescales that you gave to them. And you need to now advise them that failure to remedy the breach and put themselves back into the correct position of that tenancy may well result in you serving them an eviction notice. If they still fail to remedy the breach and they are still antisocial, you then need to start the process of eviction and therefore be able to provide evidence to the council that you have done everything within your power to avoid this from happening. Now, the challenge here is serving a Section 8 is not a problem because as managing agents, we do it for free. As let-only landlords, I'm sure you can find one for low cost or no cost. It's not expensive to serve a Section 8 notice. but it does become expensive when you actually need to then go to court. So court fees alone are £355 just to get your day in court. If you're not au fait with the rules and regulations, you may need to employ somebody to act on your behalf in court, which is anything between £600 and £1,000 for them to represent. And then bear in mind, we're going in on discretionary grounds. So it all depends how the judge feels on that day and the evidence that you have as to whether or not he will give you possession of your property. Because it's not a mandatory ground, he doesn't have to give it to you. So what I would say is that you need to make sure that your evidence is substantial, that every complaint that comes in from neighbours is documented, everything that you've done in terms of trying to remedy the breach is documented. Advise the people that are reporting the breach to you to go to the police as well if it's a police reportable case. So in the case of the lovely tenants in Liverpool, it was absolutely police reportable. They were trying to kill the neighbours. The neighbours were petrified to come out of their property. And then you turn up with all of this evidence at court on the hope that they will then evict the tenants on discretionary grounds. But it's not easy, guys. It's not easy to get tenants out of a property using discretionary. And I've never recommended that landlords go through the court procedure because of the cost involved, because you could pay £600 to £1,000 for your representation, your £355. So best part of £1,500, turn up to court and not get what you went for. Okay, so it is tough, but you have to be able to prove that you are doing what you should be in the case of antisocial behaviour. For those that are in selectively licensed areas, they are actually making it a condition that there is a specific antisocial behaviour clause in tenancy agreements, and therefore we've added that into our standard tenancy agreement now, not just our licensable ones, just to give you some bit more meat on the bone if you're trying to evict a tenant using one of the clauses.